Hey everyone, welcome back again. It is Brian, and we are back on the channel with hopefully a quicker review for you guys. Not actually a review, but in anticipation of the fall release season that we know happens every year with whiskey. I figured I would take one of my favorite annual releases, the Four Roses Limited Edition Small Batch, and I would do a little tasting of the 2018, the 2019, and the 2020 side by side and talk a little bit about the flavors as we wait for the 2021 release of not only what is going to be in this particular release, but as well as what the tasting notes might be and as we start to see it release. We usually see that and Old Forester Birthday Bourbon fall before we see the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection and before we see the Pappy Van Winkle stuff. And to be honest, this is a product that I look forward to every year. Now, if you aren't super familiar with Four Roses, go back and check out the podcast that I did with Drew P. Whiskey, and we did a little bit of a flight about Four Roses and talked a little bit about the recipes. I will pause and say, if you want to hear me talk more about Four Roses in upcoming videos, please drop down below, leave me a comment, leave me a thumbs up, and let me know you want to hear me talk about more Four Roses, whether that be a blind or just talk through it more. But Four Roses is unique because they have 5 different yeast strains, and they use those among 2 different rye recipes, a higher rye and a lower rye, which is still pretty high in the rye content. If you've watched other Four Roses videos, you probably know this stuff already, so I won't go too crazy into it. But we're going to taste through these 3. And before we do, I just want to stop for a second and say, one thing that I love about the limited edition is that it is a blend of various single barrel products that come out of Four Roses. I'm a big Four Roses drinker and I really like the single barrels, and I want to have it on the record that there is no right or wrong way of doing any sort of bourbon. There are a lot of folks who really enjoy the single barrels and a lot of people who like the batches, and I think they both have their own individual place. What I love about the LEs is that every year we get to taste a little bit of a different expression of marriages of flavor that come from Four Roses. What I love about the single barrels is that you can take singular expressions of barrels that do one flavor or one profile very well. And you're able to break that down and just drink that on its own. Sometimes that can seem a little bit boring when it comes to an LE. And other times I feel like it takes a flavor and just really hones in on what all depth it might be able to have. Now, I'm not going to go through and give all their specs of the barrels right now. I'll have those right down below as I'm tasting through the pours. Keep this video a little bit shorter. They pick various amounts of single barrels and they mingle them in to make these LEs every year. I'm going to leave a little recipe thing down below where you can check out and read a bit more about the different recipes that go into making Four Roses in general. But these are things that people who go after certain profiles look forward to seeing every year to figure out if it's going to have a spicy and fruity profile, if it's going to have kind of a quirky herbal profile mixed with a really sweet profile, anything like that. Let's go ahead and get started with the 2018 release. Immediately on the nose, I get that salted caramel note that I have mentioned on videos before that you all know that I love. It mixes with this kind of brighter, a little bit sharper green grape note. Then it moves into notes like date, raisin, fig a little bit, and the dried fruits. Then it has a note that kind of reminds me of glazed donuts or more specifically like almond paste going into an almond croissant. It kind of carries on with some oak. Really inviting nose. It reminds me, every time I try it, even to this day, it reminds me of camping out for this. And then the friends I was with, and we popped that bottle that night, and we were so excited that we camped out all night for it and then got to try it that next day. And it's just still a memorable pour to me. Let's go to the palate. Like a couple other pours that I've mentioned on the channel lately, a lot of these summer orchard fruits on the note. So, or summer orchard fruits on the palate. Really juicy, really lively on the palate. And then it moves into a really creamy profile. Some vanilla, a lot of oak. And I think that's what I really fell in love with about this pour, is that it has a really big juiciness on the front, matched with this really creamy body that trails a little bit delicately, but with a lot of oak and just a lot of flavor kind of slowly washing over the palate. go ahead and go to the 2019. 2019 on the nose, it ramps up the spice a little bit. So you have some kind of like cinnamon butter, or something that has a little bit more cinnamon to it, but then also some red fruits. Kind of has a dollop of brown sugar, but also like a brown butter. So something that's definitely like cooked and sweet there. Going to the palate, it starts with this burst of kind of like a juicy peach note, and then it moves to these lazy, easy, like not really fighting for one another, but all these flavors laying on top of one another. It's brown sugar and this honey, some barrel char. It's a really creamy and saturated profile. So it takes creaminess that the 2018 had, but it just layers it and starts to soak into the palate. And honestly, the sweetness that it has, even though it has oak, even though it has barrel char and a little bit of tobacco, those notes just remind me of dusty whiskey. It's easy, it's elegant, it's just so well done, and a flavor you don't often come across these days, I don't feel like. Let's go ahead and move to the 2020. The 2020, even more so than the 19 over the 18, ramps up the spice again, but man, really well intertwined spice, mixing with this like slightly herbal or cedar-like or pine-like, something that's kind of a woodsy note going on. But then it also has this kind of maple, playful candy sweetness as well on the nose. It's very inviting and incredibly complex. Let's go ahead and go to the palate. And the palate here is just so syrupy. It's got barrel char, it's got oak, it's got tobacco, it's got a lot of spices dancing and prickling on the palate. And honestly, it's engulfing. It's silly because, when the 2020 first came out, I had done some side-by-sides and I could have sworn that the 2019 I preferred over it. And they're different. We'll talk about that in the summary. But man, this 2020 just continues to give up a lot of fruit notes, a lot of dark fruits, like raisins and date, with these kind of burnt creme brulee and barrel char and oak and leather and tobacco notes. It's really quite intriguing, and it's so complex. So we have 18, which is playful and creamy with a good sugary sweetness. We have 19, which was very easygoing. And if I were to compare 19 to 20, sometimes if you think about music, sometimes there are albums that come out that I feel like are overproduced. They are so intricate in their details, and they're able to turn this down and this down and stack so many things on top of each other. But I feel like sometimes while you have a lot going on, it doesn't feel as warm or as pure. And that's where the 19 comes in. 19 is like that old 70s rock album where everything just weaves together, and there's breath and there's life and there's movement, and everything seems to be placed perfectly there just by chemistry. And in the 2020, while not saying it's not a great pour, everything in 2020 is just so detailed in how it's layered and how complex it is. It's just striking the difference, but yet so delicious and intriguing, the two of these side by side. I hope that was informational to you all, just to see a quick tasting. If not, I hope it was at least educational to kind of taste through these and see below some of the recipes that go into these. Yet again, I love the LE. I look forward to it every year. It's probably my most looked forward to bottle of the year, which takes a little bit away from, the BTAC and the Pappy that a lot of other people go after. But for someone like me, the Four Roses LE is what I am looking for. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Leave some comments below. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Four Roses LEs, some single barrels. If you all like the Four Roses content, if you guys want to see me do a blind of this or other blinds for Four Roses in the future, I know I've had a couple of comments about Four Roses. Leave those again below. Let me know so I know what kind of content to have for you all on the channel. Make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button, hit subscribe if you're not already. I'd love to have you join me weekly here on the channel, talking about more content for you all. If you want to support the channel, you can do so going to patreon.com/entryproofpodcast. That's a way that you can fuel the barrel picks that we do, as well as the content that we're producing here on the show. What is Entry Proof Podcast, you might ask? I'm glad that you asked. It's a podcast that I do with Drew P. Whiskey. He's also here on YouTube. We do audio podcast you can find at entryproofpodcast.com, but you can also join us on his channel, usually on Thursday nights, doing live streams, doing tastings, interviews, all sorts of things. So catch us there if you want more content. Until next time, everybody, see you later.